And welcome to
KidMath number 105.
KidMath number 105. Now, it's been a fun day, right? Because our dog woke everybody up at 5 in the morning, right?
Yeah.
So, a little brain dead, a little tired. So we're going to do a little review topic, okay? Just for fun.
Okay.
Alright, the sum of the roots for quadratics. Okay, so now when you have a quadratic equation that leads with a 1 on the x squared, okay, how do you find the sum of the roots?
Well, the sum itself is negative this, and the product
Negative what?
it's negative m, and the product is n.
Okay, and how do you figure that out?
Well, this comes from our equation x. It's actually, we can use x minus a times x minus b.
Okay. Equals 0.
This is 0.
Okay, and now let me just ask you, why do we write the roots as x minus one root and x minus the other root?
Well, because when we solve this, the roots, x is the root. X is one of the roots.
Okay, we need the roots to make an expression equal to 0. If you have a product of two numbers equals 0,
One of the numbers has to be 0.
then one of the numbers has to be 0. And that's not true for any other number, by the way. You can have the product of something be equal 6 without either one of them being 6. Give me an example.
Like 2 times 3.
Okay, very good. Okay, but for 0, if the product is 0, you have to be 0. So now when you multiply this out for the sum of the roots, which is a plus b, right?
Yeah.
One root's a, one root's b. The sum of the roots is a plus b. This middle term here comes from x times the minus b, and this x times this minus a. Okay? So now we're gonna change to a slightly more complicated version of a quadratic. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And there's two ways to find the sum of the roots.
Well, you can divide by a.
One thing you could do, assuming a is not equal to 0, and that's, since we're talking about a quadratic, I'm happy to say a is not equal to 0, because otherwise it's not a quadratic, right?
Yeah.
Okay, one thing is we could divide by a, and we get the sum of the roots is, when I divide everything by a, I get the sum of the roots is minus b over a.
Yeah.
Okay, now let me show you another way. We're going to use the quadratic formula. And we better hope we find that the sum of the roots is minus b over a, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The quadratic formula says the roots are negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, and it's 4ac over what?
2a.
2a. Okay, so in other words, one root is negative b plus the square root of b squared. That's 4ac over 2a. And the other root is negative b minus the square root of b squared. That's 4ac over 2a. Okay. Those are my two roots. What do I get when I add these together? This looks like incredibly complicated to add.
Well, when you add them together, these two square roots cancel.
Why?
Because you have a plus the square root and the minus the square root.
Okay, but I have fractions though, so that doesn't...
Yeah, but you have a common denominator.
Oh, the denominator is the same. So when I add them together, this complicated square roots go away, and what am I left with?
Minus 2b over 2a. Because you added the two b's together and you have a common denominator.
Okay, and what does that equal?
Which is minus b over a.
Hey, look at that. Okay.
Which actually works.
So that's what we got before, right?
Yeah.
Now the product is, when I have a unit 1 coefficient in the front, the product is just this coefficient?
Yeah.
Right? So your other formula, your other way of looking at the product when you have a leading coefficient that's not 1 is divide by a. So your product we would expect to be c over a.
Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, we would have to multiply these two things together and hope we were left with c over a.
That's going to take some time.
Okay, that also looks like it's complicated, but I'm not going to do it just for lack of time, but I have minus b plus something, minus b minus something. It's a difference of squares.
Yeah, so that...
Okay, so I get positive b squared, right? Minus b times minus b. minus what's in the square root, which is b squared minus 4ac. Okay?
Yep.
And on the bottom I get 4a squared. So it's actually not too complicated, and it does simplify to be c over a. So there is a very easy formula for quadratics for sum of the roots and product of the roots. That will extend to higher polynomials, but we have to do a little bit more work. Okay? All right. That's our fun, easy, get up at 5 in the morning thing for today. Okay?
All right.
Good job. Good job.